Alright, welcome back to Operation End Times. I'm your Jedi Warrior for Jesus, Ben Hellistead. This is the Building the Ark series, Bloodlines, Part 2. We're going to try and pick it up right where we left off so you don't get disconnected too much. We're talking about the sons of God being on earth and being able to manifest as either men or women, and what they were called. When they talk about these sons of God on earth, it's the beasts, the fowls, the creepy crawly things, and the cattle. So, once again, people are debating. When Cain left Nod, his wife, they bore a son, Enoch. And people are going to debate on whether he had sex with his mother Eve or with a sister that was born. Because Adam begat. Like I said, there's no mention of women after Eve till Sarah. And all the way down the family line, the family line of Seth. It is men begatting men. Shh. And no mention of wives, especially by name, but men begatting men, and then having sons and daughters. Now here's what was happening. There was 3 family bloodlines. Abel was a spiritual bloodline, which connects up to the multitude, the number of people that can't be numbered. Cain represents the beast bloodline or the foul bloodline, the spiritual bloodline, because what I'm going to tell you is his wife was most likely a female angel, if not Satan himself. The devil is a woman in a red dress. That's what they say. But these angels have different names, Samazel, Azrael, whatever. Some Lilith, some angelic being. And Cain already had divine blood, because that's what Adam and Eve were. They had the breath of life blown into him from God himself. So he was already a king, a lord from the bloodline of his father and mother. But now, hooking up with another divine bloodline, an angel, Lilith, Satan, Lucifer, produces a child, Enoch, that was a super king, a super ruler. And that's why Cain built Enoch a city, because he was a king, he was a ruler, he was a mighty man. Now, what you see about the bloodline of Cain is that they are men begatting men, no mention of women. And see, in this whole area of the bloodline over here, this blue stuff over here, both the line of Seth and the line of Cain, no mention of women, cover up of women. But the bloodline of Cain, Enoch, Irad, and Mechuyael, they only mention the firstborn son, and it doesn't mention them having any other children. So, for one, both bloodlines, these people were living tremendous amounts of time, 800, 900 years, 700 years. But on the Cain side, they're just having eldest sons. They're trying to control their population. They're trying to control the bloodline, to control the lordship, because every son is a king and having cities and people put underneath them. And there's some talk, I think it's in the book of Jashir, where they talk about birth control, that there's a potion that they make their women drink so that they wouldn't get pregnant and they would maintain their figures, so they could be the queen bees with the king, the ruler, the cruler, and his queen, and nothing but worker bees. Not a huge family of children that are lit up with the Spirit. Now, that's what was going on in the bloodlines of Seth, is that they were multiplying. Now, what they weren't doing is being fruitful, because the first command is be fruitful, then multiply. But you know what, Seth, at least they were doing that, is their bloodlines were multiplying. They were still covering up women, because it was men begatting men, but they were having sons and daughters, so the population was increasing. They were replenishing the earth, so that was something God did want to have happen. Now, were there no people on earth? No, there were other people. What they were replenishing the earth with was people who have the Spirit of God, that can actually walk in light, because everybody else couldn't. Mankind, for ages and ages and ages, for cycles and cycles and cycles of repetitive cycles, the lights had been turned off, been snuffed out, and the world had gone dark. But if you look at it, this looks like a Christmas tree when you hold it vertically, all different lights on the tree. But a tree is supposed to fill out. But see, over here on the line of Cain, it wasn't filling out because they weren't having more than just one son. They were trying to control the power, control the bloodline. Now, the side with Abel, that's the mystery. It fills out with the spiritual bloodlines or spiritual lines of the multitude that can't be numbered. But here, over on Seth, this bloodline was spreading out like a tree because they were having lots of sons and daughters. Now, were either bloodline following the true God? No. It's like a Christmas tree where the lights are blinking, but if you look at the bloodline, had it. See, the lights were on, then they go off, a period of darkness in here, then they come on again for some reason, and then they start going off, and it kind of tells you, like right here is Noah and Methuselah down here in the corner, but the Bible tells you that by the time it came for the flood, that the only two guys that were radiating light were just two people, Noah and Methuselah. Everybody else had gone dark. The world was darkness. When God looked down, all he saw was evil in the hearts of men, except for Noah. Methuselah died. And guess what? Right in that same time period, right before the flood, all those mighty men that were dying, because they were living 800, 900 years, so even like Adam, Seth, were all dying right before the flood, and it was lights going out. If they were indeed lit up, because I think some of these guys were not lit up. But a lot of things are important about this bloodline here. On the Seth side, you know, Eve was the mother of all the living. She was a woman made from the womb of man. So begins the begatting of men begatting men, but having sons and daughters. So there were females in the mix there, but wives were not mentioned. Why? Because they were just considered cattle. There were no rights. You know, they were a possession. And Cain, when he left, he took all his possessions with him. So the women that were around him went with him, and one of them became his wife. I believe it was actually an angelic woman supercharging his bloodline. But anyway, as we go down the Seth bloodline, it's Eve to Seth. Seth begats Enos, which is a dark. That's when man began to call on the name of the Lord, and that Lord was Satan. Both the descendancy of Cain and the descendancy of Seth to Enos. Seth and Enos, everybody there, they became sun worshippers, you know. Or worshiping themselves as God, because there was a lot of power. Seth and Enos, they were the direct descendants of Adam and Eve, and even all their children would be very special people. So, you know, when you got the power of the Spirit, you're either on the dark or the light, but it's easy to get sucked and tricked into the light. But I believe Adam set up the framework of creating the sacred feminine by elevating Eve and enslaving her at the same time, because he said, I have dominion over you, but guess what? You're my queen bee. So she was the first mother of the hive, but light comes out of darkness. So after Enos was born Canaan, and he was named after his uncle Cain, you know, who was only 2 generations before him. But Canaan, who was Enos' son, they said he chiseled out the doomstones that God told him the world is going to be destroyed because of darkness. He chiseled out the doomstones. And they actually mentioned there's this formula of 3 sons and 2 daughters, but he had 3 sons and 2 daughters. One of his sons was Mechuyael, which is praise God. So his son was walking with God. Canaan was walking with God. But he also had 2 daughters, Adah and Zillah. And that's where they mentioned the birth control. They said there was this potion that they were drinking in those days, and that Adah and Zillah were drinking the potion, and it would keep them from getting pregnant, and they would allow them to keep their figures, right? But you notice, it's under the light of God, women start getting known by name, because when Adam and Eve were in light, Eve's name was known, but then all of a sudden this darkness in here, women are blotted out of the picture. And in that period, there's a flood of Gihon where a bunch of people are destroyed, because that's what happens when darkness manifests. Doom and destruction follow. But Canaan was a good king, and he made the doomstones. His son was Mechuyael. He had 2 other sons, but he also had 2 daughters, Adah and Zillah. And why are they important? One, they're mentioned in the Bible on the lineage of Cain, because they're mentioned as Lamech's 2 wives. So right there, I have a line here where it is the daughters of, on the Seth line, that cross over. They are taken by the Cain bloodline to be as wives. And see, it's almost like Sarah. Sarah with Abraham she was barren and she didn't have a child until she was 90. And that was part of her walk with God, was to trust God to give her a child late into her walk in life. But it was the same with Ada and Lila, because they were taking this birth control portion. But Ada had children first, and she had 2 sons. Their names were Jabal and Jubal. And the reason why they're important is Jabal was the father of all those who live in a tent. And tents are spiritual. It's the Hebrew word ohel, and it means shining, the shining ones, the spiritual ones. And he was also the father of all who have cattle. And therefore, he had some kind of a church going, spiritual church, and he had people following him on a spiritual level. And Jubal was the father of those who play the harp and the lyre, and that's a spiritual thing too, because King David would play the lyre, and it would relieve the evil spirits out of King Saul. So the 2 brothers had a spiritual connection, and they were able to heal people and walk and talk with God and in the Spirit. I do believe they were walking in the light. I have them marked down as in the dark over here, but I'm going to say they were in the light. But both of them are described as the fathers of all, which would be highly weird, because see, what's happening right over here is Noah gets born right here, and then the flood is right here off the page. So why would you be talking about these guys being the father of all if all of a sudden their bloodlines are cut off because they're all killed because of the flood? And the answer is because they weren't. Maybe some of them were, but these 2 guys, their children and them themselves were given a choice. The cattle, if they heard God calling, saying, come into the ark, the cattle went into the ark. Those are the cattle that God is remembering in Genesis 8:1. So there were people on board, the beasts and the cattle, just like in Revelations. There are beasts standing around the throne of God. Now, Zillah, it kind of represents Sarah, because she was drinking that potion. She couldn't have children. She was like 70 years old, but she prayed to God, and when she finally had a child, she said, God has given me children. And here's the crossing back over of the bloodlines. Her 2 children were Tubal Cain, who worked with metals, Genesis 4:22. That's the 22. Just like in modern day, George, the royal baby of William and Catherine, was born on 7/22, Genesis 4:22, and Noah was born at the turn of the year on some specific date as well. But Zillah, Tubal Cain was born unto her, and Naamah, a daughter that then became the wife of Noah and climbed on board the ark. So that's very important. But the other thing that is happening here in this time frame, right here as these daughters cross over to the line of Cain, is also up here on a spiritual level, the angels, Genesis 6, the sons of God come down to earth and take daughters and bear children with them. And it's said that it is during the time of Jared, which almost sounds like Jabal or Jubal, but Jared, his name means descent, those who descended down, the fallen angels, the 300, the watchers. They became rulers. Jashir chapter 4 talks about the rulers, the judges who took daughters, men who took cattle, beasts, and fowls and mixed with them. Now, you're either talking about bestiality, which people who are trapped in their carnal 3D mindset, that's all they can think of. And you know what? That may indeed have been happening, because that would be a dark and wicked thing to be doing. But I'm telling you, spiritually, they were mating with these spiritual people as well. It was these angels of God. And the men, who the offspring, are the cattle and the beasts and the fowls, and they were all mating and mixing. But hey, the bottom line here, the guy's name that stands out is, once again, the names kind of cross over, because Enoch here gets named after his uncle Enoch over here. But there's 3 people on both bloodlines that are all kind of named the same thing. Enoch's son was Irad, was Mechuyael, who then had Methusael, and on the Seth line, Canaan had Mahalalel. But Mahalalel, Mechuyael, and Mechuyael all kind of sound the same, but Mahalalel means praise God on the Canaan side, the Seth side of the family line, whereas up here, Mechuyael means is of God. So I'm telling you, the mystery here is Mechuyael which is the fifth generation or the fourth generations of sons, who was his wife? And I'm going to tell you, I think once again, it was an angel, a female angel, injecting her divine DNA. And that's why what came out of this bloodline was Lamech, a powerful man who had powers, and the daughters then went over to mate with him to produce a super daughter over here that eventually became the daughter, a queen bee, walking onto the ark with Noah. All right, hey, I'm going to wrap that up because we still got the whole bloodline on the other side coming off the ark to look at. I know my paper looks like crap, but hopefully you were able to follow some of this, and I'll see if I can create a document that's a little easier to read, maybe that I can post on the internet. All right, hey, this is Operation End Times, building the ark. You need to know what happened in the past, the present, the future, whatever. Stack it all up for better understanding. All right, God bless.